Hello everyone and welcome to Smart Creations with me, Josh. Today we're going to be making this painting based on the photograph that I found online that I just showed. I'm going to be showing some techniques as we go along. This is a time lapse, so I'm not actually going this fast. This took me around 30 minutes. It's not that hard of a painting to do, even if you have barely ever painted. First, I'm going to make my base layers with green, pink, and blue. I'm going to put my green up to my horizon line. I do want to say, before you start doing this, make yourself a completely different shade of green. I really messed up. I didn't blend out all the green. That's my brother back there. So I used, instead, you should combine green, yellow, and gray to make a much better color. Okay, so now I'm making my sky, which will start with my pink. Make sure you use water. I'm using acrylics instead. You can also use oil, don't use watercolor. People always think that if you're not using watercolor, you don't need water. That is so wrong. You need water or else it just won't flow and your painting will not come out the right way. So I think my biggest mistake in this whole thing was that green, and it really basically set me up for a disaster, but I think the end product was pretty good. You'll see that at the end. So this is not a very complicated painting, just as long as if you try and stick to the basics, it shouldn't be that complicated. It shouldn't take you that long. So I've actually put duct tape around my border of my canvas so that it comes out it actually makes a really nice frame when I peel it off at the end. So now I'm using an artist knife, which is a very handy tool to have around you. It is great for making mountains and straight edges with paint. So I'm going to start this mountain, and then I realized something, that whenever I kept on pulling it down, it made the mountain uneven. So then I kept on making it bigger and bigger until I was like, okay, I just can't do this anymore. I need a paintbrush. So perfect timing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it. I'm going to look at, you should always have your reference picture nearby because it really helps make sure you're using the right colors, right shapes. I traced out my mountain. I didn't trace it, but I sketched it out with a pencil. Even though I use it a lot throughout this channel, you'll also learn some other techniques to tracing or sketching that you actually don't need a pencil for. It actually sometimes come out with better results. So now, as I looked at the mountain, I actually noticed one really major thing. It looks like you can see through it because there's ice at the top, and when the sky reflects off of it, it will become pink. So I just actually had to leave that empty and then added some details to make it nice. Sorry, my brother is hilarious. I see you hopping around. So as you can see, the mountain actually looks really good right now. It looks a lot like a mountain, which is our goal. I will be adding clouds later. You can do that whenever you want. I'm just trying to wait until my sky dries. And then I realized how bad of a shade of green my grass is. So I make that color that I told you about. It's like an army green. It's green, yellow, and gray. So, now actually, I'm taking a dark gray and putting it at the bottom that will add this mid-ground hill. It's hard to spot on the painting, but if you looked at the photograph, it's actually very clearly there. So I realized it was the wrong shade of green, so I tried again, but this first layer just made it look completely dark, way darker than I wanted. Maybe add some white. Oh God. So basically there was this one line in my painting. I don't know why, but it just wouldn't let me paint over it. So I waited for it to dry and then I went over it again, but that was really bothering me this whole time. Yeah, okay. So if you take a look at my mountain, it's looking really good right now. Sometimes you just have to let something dry and then take a step back and look at it. When I was there close and I didn't take a step back to look at it, I was like, this looks so bad. But if you take a step back, you'll realize how good your painting actually looks. Okay, so I'm just going over it with green. Not a lot of interesting things, but some things I can note that I could have probably done better, because I don't want you guys to make the same mistakes. Your brush strokes. Your brush strokes will be visible. Make sure that you're using your brush strokes the right way. use that surrounding. It's hill, so add those hills. So that was one of the mistakes that I made. I did not add hills, which ended up making it a completely different landscape. You'd really be surprised how those little details affect the painting. Okay, so now I'm gonna take some brown after this, and I'm going to make a little path down, a dirt path, which I noticed, and it's pretty far back, so there's not a lot of detail to it. You just need some brown so it's zigzag. One mistake I made here is I should have let it dry, and I shouldn't have added that much water. I basically broke the paint, so I basically added a bit of green to that so that it sort of blended in. I added way too much water without drying it, so you'll see it comes out, it's like sort of breaks the canvas, the paint under it. So it didn't look as good as I hoped, but it's fine because it's not the main subject of the painting. Add more detail to your grass. I didn't, and I'm gonna say again, it makes such a difference. So in the photograph, if you look down in the description, which I'll have a link to it, it actually has what looks like stalks of wheat behind it. So I try to create that using yellow. I didn't add much detail only because I knew when I added those big pink flowers in the front, you wouldn't really see it. So you don't need to add that much detail to this. If you want, go ahead, you're free to. I didn't. I don't know if I should have. I think it's okay how it turned out without it. So now I let it dry for about 10 minutes, but in the meantime, I did decide, I was like, I had no clue what to do. I realized it was too wet. I was like, oh wait, the clouds are also the same color as the flowers. I'd already mixed my paint. So I made the clouds at this point. I meant to do them at the end, but whatever. So I'm gonna take it, I'm not adding any detail. I really should have, because when you look at it up close, it will look really solid, and that's not what we want. So now I'm gonna do, so if you've ever seen Bob Ross, how he makes his evergreens is actually a very specific way. He makes his thin trunks, and then he takes a fan brush and makes leaves. I'm going to do something similar, but to make these circle-petaled flowers. So I'm going to make these stalks, these stems, using pink. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that pink, and I'm going to take a round-headed brush, and I'm just going to like dab it. I'm going to put it at the top, I'm going to put it in pink, and I'm just going to put it on top of the stem around it. So I'm sort of going to skip ahead a little bit here, just so that you don't have to see me adding dots all over the place, which would be interesting if this was like a pointillism or if a stippling video, but it's not. So I'm sort of going to show you the first two, and then I'm going to stop. So something really important when you do things like this is you can't just make them one color. If you make them one color and they're really close together, you won't be able to tell what the texture is. So there are some great ways to make textures that I hope maybe even can make a very specific video just for that. But texture is so important, and a lot of people forget about it. So now what I did is I took purple and I made those petals again so you could see that depth, that texture. And then I realized I sort of messed up, because what I should have done is I should have looked at the photograph. Always look where the light source is from. If it doesn't actually show a light source in the picture, you can always figure it out by shadows. So if you look at the flowers, one side is light and one side is dark. So when you put one side of it, the dark side should actually be where on one side, and the light side should be on a different one. So now what you can do is just go over them and don't overdo it. That is a common mistake. People think that they have to go over it, and then there's no point in doing it because you're back where you began. So now that's the finished painting. I'm just gonna peel off the things, and that's what it looks like next to the original photograph. Hi everyone! Please subscribe to our channel and press the like button.